time? I saw teachers dancing in center space. I saw a rap happening in the High Museum Gallery. There's the teacher. She's like, don't call on me. It was great. I'm just so impressed by everyone. You're all taking wonderful risks to do more for your students, and it's just been really great so far for us. I'm pleased to welcome Karen Anderson today to the stage and to tell you more about a really special event we have just for you. It's the first time that we've ever done this. It's called Tiny Doors and Backstage Tours. Karen Anderson is the director and principal artist of Tiny Doors ATL. Tiny Doors is an Atlanta-based art project bringing big wonder to tiny spaces. There are doors all around Atlanta. If you've never seen them, there's a map online. You definitely have to go check them out. They're wondrous. They're fun to find all around the city. It's just each one has its own unique personality and story to it. And we're lucky that Karen is here to talk with us today. The goal of Tiny Doors ATL is to inspire curiosity and exploration by highlighting neighborhoods and landmarks that make Atlanta unique. Her miniature public art installations have inspired a community of fans who believe in free and accessible art. She graduated from Rutgers University, earning a degree in visual art. She's an art instructor and works with Girls Rock Camp, ATL, which you'll hear more about. Her work's been featured on NPR, BuzzFeed, Atlanta Magazine, and other places. After the talk, I'll come back on stage and give directions about what we're going to do after, but join me in welcoming Karen to the stage. How's it going? Hello. Just going to get a little stuff. How's it going out there? This is your second day? Awesome. All right, I want to thank the Woodruff Art Center for having me. Outside of the program in your pocket, how many of you have heard of Tiny Doors ATL before this? No way! That's awesome! Thank you. It's really an honor to be here. I want to tell you a little bit more about the project and about myself and about the impact it's had on me as an artist and as a teacher. I tried to put something together today that maybe would help you work as a teacher, and maybe if you wanted to try this Tiny Doors project with your classroom, meet us afterwards. So I went to an art high school. It was a public school, and we called our teachers by their first names. And the dance teacher was so protective of the floor in the gym that she wouldn't let us wear shoes. I think down here in the South they call that a hippie school. But whatever you call it, I was lucky to be in an environment where art was valued and encouraged. But still, somewhere along the way, that doubt set in. And I started to think that a college degree in art wasn't worth the money, it wasn't worth the time, but there were so many artists that there was no way I was going to make it. You know, that sneak in. So after art school, I started a punk rock band. Like, that's definitely going to make it. And I was lucky that I got to travel around the country and see everything from the window of my tour bus. And sometimes I had to push the tour bus. But it was still a really good time. And after a few years, I started to think, this isn't my passion. It's great, it's fun, but it's not my passion. My passion is visual art. My passion is sculpture. So I went back to school. At 25, I went to Rutgers, and I got my degree in art there. And I found I learned a lot about design, and it helped me have the tools to see what I was trying to do. And art history gave me context. And in 2013, I moved to Atlanta, and I spent a year getting to know the city. I volunteered, teaching music and art, and I fell in love with Atlanta's unique neighborhoods. From commissioned murals, to sculpture, to free art left in the street for neighbors to find. Do you guys like that lamb? Yeah. Awesomely, one of the city's most revered venues for street art is right next to my house. This is the Croc Street Tunnel. It's a 100-year-old train yard underpass, and it serves as a community art space. People paint there all day. I saw someone painting there this morning.
The authorities don't stop people, they just kind of let it happen, and I was blown away by this. A real-time conversation between artists. So as someone who just moved here, it seemed like a really good place to join in. I knew I wanted to make something free, and something that was public, and something that contributed to the city. I just wanted to join the conversation. So for a year I watched, and it seemed natural to counter all this big, beautiful art with something small and tangible. So on July 28th, 2014, door number 1 was installed in the Krog Street tunnel. It was wood and cement and painted to match the style of the tunnel itself. So the cement dried, and then I waited. For a long time, I waited. I passed this door every day on my way to work, and I started to wonder after a few months whether anything was going to happen. And I thought maybe the conversation that I was joining might just be it getting painted over or destroyed. But it wasn't destroyed. In fact, things started to appear in front of the tiny door. A tiny box of biscuits. A bunch of tiny cats. I didn't do this, I swear. But it was when a tiny newspaper about the tiny door appeared on the tiny stoop that I knew the conversation had started. There's a collection of these, you'll get to see them later. The idea behind tiny doors was always to encourage imagination. I saw in this big city a desire to stop, to slow down, and to enjoy the little moments that can make us feel transported. Our first motto was, bringing big wonder to tiny spaces. Seems simple enough, right? The job of these doors was to reflect their neighborhoods, to look and feel as though they'd been there forever. Think about it. This is Wyatt. A door that's only 7 inches tall means that every single person is too big to fit. Kind of a common denominator for adults and children. And if we're all too big to fit through the door, then we all have to use our imagination together. The first idea was to make the doors and install them completely anonymously. It's a little bit embarrassing. My first Instagram post said something like, "Look at this cool door I found." But I realized that by standing back, I was missing out on a key part of the conversation. I never wanted to tell people who lived behind the doors. That's why we call them tiny doors and not fairy doors or gnome doors. It's so that you can imagine who lives there. So I didn't need to tell them who lived there, but maybe just being someone who cared about and took care of the doors would help them feel more connected to the neighborhood. And soon, the hashtag lit up with people sharing their experiences at the doors. And it wasn't long after our social media accounts opened that journalists started to inquire. For people-sized newspapers. A question I often heard was, what's behind the tiny doors? The answer is simple. Are you ready? Epoxy. Like 7 kinds of epoxy. So much epoxy that I feel like I could write a book on it. I might make a zine. We'll see. But luckily for me, the journalists were smart, and they always came back to imagination, to collective art, and to the power of imagination. So the conversation that had started wasn't just between Tiny Doors and other public artists. This was a conversation with Atlanta. So a shift started to happen. It wasn't just about bringing big wonder to tiny spaces, or even being free in public, although that's still really important. This was about tying together neighborhoods in Atlanta. In the first year, 20,000 people visited our online map to find the locations of the doors. They were curating a kind of tour of Atlanta. And so it became even more difficult and even more important to choose where a door would go. So I talked about it with the rest of the tiny team, and we decided that we wouldn't decide where a door would go. We would let people come to us. So now every door that goes up is from a neighborhood that has applied for a door, and we work with them for about 6 months. Right now there's a ton of red tape about insurance with the city of Atlanta. This isn't being streamed live, is it? door a collaboration between artists and neighbors. And we have to decide in the process what makes a neighborhood special. How can this tiny door highlight what makes a neighborhood unique? When I asked the Inman Park Peckworks owner how a door in her street could interact with the neighborhood, she said, well, a tiny bulletin board would be great. People put bulletins up in our store. What if they made tiny bulletins? I said, okay, we'll give it a shot. So construction began, and the door was installed. But would people actually make tiny bulletins? You saw that coming, right? Can you see Snoop Dogg up there? I thought that was pretty creative. A few months after this door went up, we were invited by a local nonprofit called Trees Atlanta to create a door in an old American elm tree. So with great respect for the door, and even greater respect for the tree, door number 5 was installed. This was our only door that opened, and I miss it. It's down for repair right now. And I work on these doors every single day, and about a week after this door went up, I was just touching up the screws, sitting in front of the door. It's on the top of a hill, and this woman yelled up at me. She said, "What are you doing to that door?" I said, "I'm just fixing it." I was a little scared. She came up the hill, and we started to talk, and she said, "Oh, okay, I'm just making sure. I can't stand the thought of this door being destroyed. It's in my neighborhood." I thought about it. I said, wow, it's not just a sense of wonder and whimsy that she's feeling. She's feeling protective of this door. Oh, yeah, I've since made a suitcase. I don't get yelled at anymore. It's really effective. Another surprising moment that I wanted to tell you about happened recently. I was working on a door on the Atlanta Beltline. This one's in the Old Fourth Ward by the skate park. I was working and about 10 kids gathered around me. And I could hear them talking behind me. And they were asking each other questions, asking me a couple questions. And then they were talking a little bit about who lives behind the door. And then they got together. You know how they can do. And they decided there was one really important question that they needed to know the answer to. They said, "Why doesn't the door open?" And that's a good question, and it's a little bit scary, because I know that they want it to open, they want to feel it and have that gratification. But I said, picture in your head what's behind the door right now. Tell me, if this door opened, what could you see that would be more amazing than what's in your head? And they got it. I mean, of course they got it. But I, for a second, was scared that one of them was going to go, $1 million would be more amazing than what's in my head. But they didn't. They really understood. And I was impressed. They got it. They understood that it was about the power of their own imagination. That's the door in question. So for the last 3 years, I've been the Applied Arts Director for Girls Rock Camp ATL. It's a local nonprofit organization. And it combines my love of visual art, and of music, and of working with kids. My job at the camp is to help the girls create a logo. So they start in camp, and they make a band with girls that they've never met before, and then they come up with a name, and then we create a logo. And I try to help them think about symbolism. I try to help them not just write the name of the band on the shirt, but to think about what symbols might evoke the name in somebody's head. Can you find jelly bean donkey cheese? So when Girls Rock Camp asked me to create a door for the camp, it was the first time that I'd made one for a classroom setting. Before this, they'd all been public, and they'd all been free, and I had to think a lot about vandalism, and think a lot about foot traffic and weather, but I hadn't had to think about what a door would be like in a classroom, and what it meant there. And it changed the questions that I had to ask. So some of the questions that came up when I was working in the classroom were, how can art reflect the learning environment? What motivates the students in this classroom? And what are the common goals and experiences of the students? And that was a question that was really big when I was working on the Girls Rock Camp door. This is the location that we chose. It seemed like a good fit because it's somewhere that the girls see every single day. This is the amp on the main stage. So they're all sitting at the front of the camp and they see this amp, and it's something that they can all identify. So we chose this location for the Girls Rock Camp door. And I thought about a shared experience. This is what they all do. On the very last day of camp, they all walk through a stage door. And they get up there and they perform. And it's brave, it's amazing, and it's incredible, and some of them are nervous, and some are excited, and they're all kind of all of it. But they get up there. So I made a backstage door. This is the door on the amp with a little bit of vibe, that's what we call it, stuff hanging in the back behind it. And at the end of camp, we took this door and put it in the auction. And it raised enough money to put 2 girls through camp the next summer. So I'll leave you today with this thought. Tiny Doors ATL started as a small interjection into the vast conversation of art in a major city. Along the way we learned, of course, that it's not about doors or even tiny art, that the force that drives this conversation, the piece that brings adults and children and rock campers and neighborhoods together, is an invitation to tap into our own imagination. The big surprise behind the tiny doors is the wonder inside of us all. Thank you.